Over the last 12 hours, I've lost over 100 subscribers for something I didn't do. And by the time this is all over, I'm sure that number will be significantly higher. Now, a whole bunch of things to get into here. First of all, I'm okay with the subscribers I've lost. I am. If I've lost you due to the recent drama, which we'll briefly get into, then it probably means you didn't get enough value from the content or weren't actively watching the content, in which case that's okay. At the same time, as much as I've specifically and intentionally not wanted to ever have to do anything like this, there is a certain point where the negative association has to finally be called out as not being there. For those of you who don't know what's going on, I'm not going to heavily get into it. I'm not. I just don't want to get into drama. This video is going to be 90% me talking about my policies on the channel, and then you as a viewer, whether you are an existing viewer, whether you're a new viewer, whether whatever happens, you can decide if the content I produce is the content that's right for you. That's going to be 98% of the video. The first 2% of this video is going to be mildly commenting on the drama. For those who don't know, there is a big drama going on in the YouTube content creator space right now about a whole thing with Aeon's Trespass Odyssey and Quackalope. I do not want to get into it, and I will not be getting into it, because I don't believe in commenting publicly on my peers. Even what I'm doing now, I don't feel comfortable with. But I've also lost over 100 subscribers in the past 12 hours for someone who I haven't done a video with in the past year, which, as much as I don't want to, didn't want to, and don't feel comfortable with this video, at a certain point I have to say something. So, for those who have picked up on it, many of you have, I have not done content with Quackalope in over a year. And for those who've been paying attention, the content was rapidly shifting downwards for several months before that. And I don't want to comment on things too much, but I will say that I have said to people who asked that we have different approaches to the industry, and that is true. That is what it is. There has been once upon a time, we did a lot of stuff together. We have different approaches to the industry, and I will say, because it was said, and I've seen people quote this, I've seen a bunch of people quote that Quackalope and I stopped doing things together because I took a job at Gamefound. That is not true. Those of you who have been paying attention will notice that the content slowed down way before that ever happened. It is not because of that, it is because he and I have different approaches to the industry. I am not here to judge his approach to the industry, because there are those who might judge my approach, and everyone has their own stance and approach. I'm not here to get into that, and I'm not here to comment on my peers. But I also think it's worth at some point publicly saying I'm not tied together with Quackalope. And long before anything happened this week, I chose to try to separate my approach. That's it. That is the extent of what I'm going to say about that. If you're here for that juicy update, that is the entire part. You can click away from this video now. The rest of this video will be a conversation around my approach to the industry, which may or may not suit what you're looking for. That's true. And again, inherently the nature of the algorithm means most of you watching this are those of you who already value the content I put out and already have decided that you get value from my content. Thank you. Genuinely thank you. I appreciate you. For the most part, the rest of this video, or even that starting point, is for those who might hopefully see this video and didn't know that or didn't think of that. Because again, I didn't do anything this week. I've lost hundreds of subs and more will follow, which is fine, but I've lost hundreds of subs and more will follow because of an association that isn't present. So, let's get into it. Again, drama over, moving on to my approach to content. This video is my approach to content and bias to the industry. It's going to hopefully cover every single thing that I could think of when drafting these notes as to the reasons why you might want to take anything I say with a grain of salt. And we're going to get into it, but every form of paid content, every form of possible bias, I will talk about in this video that I can think of, and I will pin a comment with anything anyone can point out that I didn't realize, or anything I think of later that I didn't realize. There will be a pinned comment with anything I miss. But past that, the practical reality, starting off the bat, well, first of all, before we get to my approach to content and bias, if you don't just like me, if you don't like my voice, if I talk too fast, if I slur my words too much, if there's anything personal about my presentation in any way, shape, and form that turns you off from my content, then you shouldn't watch the content. Obviously, that is what it is. That's just part and parcel. Either you resonate with my approach, either you resonate with the way I talk and approach things, or not, and that's fine. There's someone out there for you. There are many, many channels, fantastic channels out there that I can recommend, that I have recommended in the past, and there's so many good channels. You will find one that resonates with you, and I'm glad that you do. But if it's a personal thing, then it's a personal thing. There's only so much I can do. As far as the practical approach and what my approach to content bias, pricing, all those things like that, is the practical reality is that what I do here is a job. I put out around 50 videos a month. This past month was like 59 videos. That's a little higher than average. I put out around 50 videos a month, which is around 600 videos a year. That is a lot of videos. That's almost 2 videos a day on average, and I think my average actually is above 2. I'm rounding down at 50. I put out an average of 2 videos a day, every single day, and I don't miss a day. This is a job. And it's a job I love, make no mistake. It's a job I love, and it's a hobby that I absolutely adore. I saw one comment on one thread with this whole drama, but like, I seem like someone who just like got in on something popular. I've been in board games since 2011, and I've been in love with this hobby for a long time, and I've played like 1,800 games last year. Like, I am in love with the hobby. You don't have to like what I say or do, but if you know me, you know that I love board games to a fault, to an actual fault, in a way that I'm a boring person at parties, because you want to talk about sports and I want to talk about board games. You want to talk about video games? I like video games. You want to talk about Zelda? I don't care. I'm here for the board games. And so it is a job, but it's a job I love. It's a job that I adore, to the point that it could be obnoxious. At the same time, the amount of work and everything I do and put into it does mean that I do look to I do want this to be worth the time, effort, and energy I put into it. That's why I keep doing it. That's why I keep putting out content. That's why I keep doing topical videos, top 10 videos, conversational videos, the 8 hours I put in every Sunday to research the crowdfunding campaign so I could talk about it in a video. There's a lot of work that goes into this. I love it. I do, genuinely. But there's a lot of work. I also pay Devin and Professor Meg as employees to, they're part-time employees. They're not in everything, but they're in enough content. I do pay them, and there's plenty of expenses along with the channel as well. Conventions, board games, there's all these things. Like, not everything I get is a publisher copy. I buy and review plenty of games, and so there's lots of expenses associated with this. Before we dive into the expenses, I did this in a whole other video. I'm not going to make that the focus, but right now, just so you have context, right now my average YouTube monthly revenue is around $2,200 a month, and my average Patreon revenue is around $2,100 a month, which works out to around $51,000 a year for me and for what I pay for Devin and Meg and expenses and all that. And if you're like, those numbers are lower than the last time, yes, they are lower. Ever since I took a job at Gamefound, which is a relative part of this conversation, my Patreon has gone down, understandably, because people are like, hey, we don't want to support you as much, you have a job, it's in the space. Totally understandable, but revenue and some numbers are down from the last time I talked about this. Numbers always will be in flux, and that's okay. That's just part and parcel. But that's YouTube revenue and Patreon revenue. That's before we get into anything else, which anything else is the part and the topic of this video. But practically speaking, while I am incredibly grateful for the position I'm in, and there are many who would be incredibly grateful and should be incredibly grateful for the position I'm in, I choose, whether you agree with or not, I choose to try to seek other ways to improve that number because of the expenses and the cost and value of time and all those things. Which you might disagree. You might be someone who's sitting there saying you love this hobby and you should do it just for the love of the hobby. You might be. Or you might say, well, $51,000 and even less expense and all those things, that should be enough. And that's totally fine. That is totally fine. I just want to give you all the information. And once I give you the information, you can decide whether this is a channel for you. Again, I recognize most of your subscribers. Genuinely, thank you for being here. But none of that is your problem. This is just an explanation of the practical side, the money, all those things. It's just a practical conversation. And I'll always be transparent about every single thing I possibly can. I don't have an official, that's not true, I semi-have an official rate sheet, but it's not, we're working on it. We're working in the process. There'll be an official rate sheet at some point. You'll see all those things. You'll see all the numbers. And you're like, rate sheet? I thought you don't charge for content. I don't charge for most content. We're gonna talk about this all in a second. Which, actually, let's do this now. I'm gonna separate this thing into 2 sections. And there'll be timestamps as usual to everything. There's going to be the actual paid content I do, and then a conversation around every bias I can think of. And that's just to give you the full picture that you can possibly have, so you can decide if my content is right for you. It's just a choice, just a decision. It is what it is. The paid content is a fairly short conversation. The first thing is 98% of the 600 videos I do a year are not paid videos. There might be bias. We'll get to the bias section later, but they're not paid videos. They are not paid for. There's no anything. There's no money attached to them. If I don't tag a video as a paid sponsorship, if I don't tag a video as a paid content, and if I don't tell you in the video that is paid content, then there is no money. There's none. I had somebody asking me, like, hey, why are you not disclosing how much you got paid for Monster Hunter World Iceborne? And the answer is, I didn't get paid. That's why I didn't disclose it. Now, we did get a trip. We'll talk about that later. We'll talk about those things. But as far as paid content, nearly all content is not paid. Anything that I call a review is not paid. The amount of times people think I do paid content. It is so frustrating. It is so frustrating that people think I'm collecting a paycheck for my videos, and I'm like, I wish I was. Well, I don't actually wish I was. That would ruin the fun. But if once you think I'm getting paid, I kind of wish, like, if I'm going to get the negative association of getting paid, I almost just wish I was getting paid. But I'm not, and that's fine. As always, I want to cater my content toward those who watch and appreciate, and not towards those who've written me off and moved on. That's fine. Again, content creators for everyone. So most content is not paid. What is paid? Let's talk about that. First of all, preview videos. If a video is called a preview and it's filmed by someone who's not me on my channel, that is paid content. It'll have the tag, it'll be announced in the video that's a paid video, and it will not be done by me. Those are the first things to know about paid preview videos. They are a handful of them. They show up maybe once a week on average. They do exist. They help pad some of those expenses. The cost for a paid preview video, to be transparent, again, fully transparent, the cost for a paid preview video does currently range. It's not a fixed price right now. It is partially based on whether somebody buys, something else with it, or also how complicated the game is. But generally, we've been charging between $300 to $500 for a paid preview video. Opinions do not go in the video. The closest thing you get to an opinion is, like, how the game might feel or who it might be right for. You do not get an opinion from us in a paid preview video, and it is disclosed from here till tomorrow. Well, not here till tomorrow. I guess we could say every 3 seconds in the video, but it should be pretty clear. It's called a preview, it's tagged as paid, and Devin in the video says this is a paid preview video. That's the first kind of paid content you'll see on the channel. The second kind of paid content that you won't see right now, but is something that's in the works and I'm trying to slowly work my way towards, is paid playthrough content. Now, I'm still figuring this out. I'm still figuring out the exact ways, because I might be involved in that, and I don't like being personally involved in something that gets paid content. I'm still figuring out some of the details. Right now, what I'm trying to currently do is seek out paid campaign game content for games I already like where I reach out to a publisher and say, hey, I really like, Massive Darkness, and I'd love to do a paid playthrough campaign of that game for a game that I already like. It will, so a few things. One, if I do that, it'll be fully transparent, fully marked as paid, fully anything. Any form, let's just do it this way, because I don't know exactly what paid playthrough content will look like on the channel, but it is something we're exploring. And so to that end, any form of paid playthrough content will be 100% marked. It'll be 100% marked as paid, and it'll be 100% tagged as paid, and it'll be, again, the transparency will 100% be there. It hasn't really needed to be there, because I just don't do it. But if it shows up, it will be fully transparent. I understand and recognize that if I am involved, forget me, even with a paid preview video, there's, the fact that Board Game Co., the entity, is collecting a check from somebody, does introduce bias on Board Game Co. and me, Alex, the reviewer. That introduces bias. That is true. You have to decide whether you're okay with that. And I understand and agree that it further muddies the water if, let's say, I'm in a paid playthrough of Game X while doing a review, unpaid, of Game X. I understand that it muddies the water. Currently, I'm trying to avoid that. I don't want to go with that route. Currently, the route I'm trying to approach with paid playthrough content is only reaching out to publishers who I already like and offering a fairly low price per video on games that I already know I like. That's the approach I'm trying to take. And I still understand there will be people who don't like it, are unhappy with that, and are concerned about the bias. And I think that's reasonable. That's totally reasonable. You have to decide, as always, if the content is right for you. The next kind of paid content we do, and again, so far, paid playthroughs we don't actually do yet. While I'm doing this video, let's talk about things that are in the works. The next thing up is sponsored Instagram posts. We haven't done a ton of these. We've done maybe 6 of these. Maybe no. I think we will be doing 6 or so. We've only done 2 maybe. But paid Instagram posts is something that you will again see if we do a paid Instagram post. Over on Instagram, 90% of the content are reels or photos, and again 90% is unpaid content with a degree of opinion, or maybe not even opinion, just fun pictures. Anything that is paid will be tagged promotional post or sponsored post. They'll be tagged. The first tag will be, this is a promotional post. I will also try, I don't think I've done this with I think I've only done 2 so far. One second. Coffee is important. It's been a busy day. I think the 2 I've done, I haven't done this, but I will try to do this going forward. I think I will try doing at the very top of the description, this is a paid post. So it's not just hiding in the tag, but rather it's, this is a paid post, and take that into account. The goal is not to hide it. It's just a question of trying to figure out the balance of transparency without being obnoxious. So I'm going to put it in the description and the tag. That's what we're going to do going forward as far as those. Again, it's only 2 so far. Both of them have the tag. They didn't have the description. So we'll modify that for full transparency. But sponsored Instagram posts. In terms of cost, that's currently around 100 to 150. Again, depends if it's bundled with something, whatever it is. And that's, hey, here's a, thing to talk about and some more exposure for your game. And as usual, it will not have an opinion in it, and it will be fully transparent and clear. That's next thingy. The last thing in the paid content category would be exceptions. And exceptions, I only have one right now, but it just means it's not actually something I offer. It just happens. Oh, actually, no, I have two exceptions. The first exception is I've done, I think twice, I've done a paid pledge manager walkthrough where a company reached out and said, hey, we'd like you to do a video where you talk to your audience and cover the paid pledge manager walkthrough and show them some details on what you can get. Again, that's been done twice, I think, and both times it's announced it's paid, it's tagged as sponsored, and I'm fully transparent about the entire thing. Does it introduce bias with anything else I review from that publisher? Yes, it does introduce bias. I try to be mindful and counter the bias, but it is a bias. Inherently, any form of relationship, which we're going to get to soon, relationships are forms of bias. The other exception thing I could think of is there is a company right now that is currently paying me to be involved in playtesting and game design and give feedback effectively. Give a lot more, kind of what I do with a prototype already, but with a lot more feedback and back and forth with that company. And I actually haven't officially signed a contract, but that's something else. And again, anything I do with that company or that game, whatever, will be fully transparent. That's actually behind the scenes. It's a little trickier, meaning it's not actually a video, but it's working with a company. And for the next several videos I review from that for the next several games I do from the company, I will make the disclaimer of, hey, I have done paid content with them. So, meaning it won't even be related. It'll be unrelated, but I'll be like, I've done paid content with this company. So I'll try to, again, be fully transparent to everything. Those are exceptions. Those are like literally, I say exceptions as a general category. Things can happen. The next, so that's all paid content. Anything outside of that is not paid. And if that changes, it will be fully transparent, not just tagged, not just, hidden in the description. And I don't say this with any judgment towards anyone. I'm saying I want to be clear with you when I do paid content. I want to be clear with you when I do paid content. If I'm clear, if you as a viewer know that I'm telling you when it's paid content, then you'll also know that 98% of the content I do is not paid. The goal of almost everything I do is to cover the hobby from a sake of love and passion for the hobby. There's a degree of paid content I'm willing to engage with because I'm trying to grow something that could be something I do for the rest of my life. I love what I do. I want to be in this space. But hopefully it makes sense. And again, maybe it makes anyone who's doing it as a job not someone who's the right content creator for you. That's reasonable. That is your decision to make. Which brings us to the next conversation, which is around bias. Every form of bias that I can personally think of. And again, I'll pin a thing if anyone can say like, oh, what about this, this, and this? I'll pin it. I'm not trying to hide from anything. I'm just going to go into everything so you can be an informed viewer because, dear Lord, this is frustrating. Anyways, moving on. So, paid content. No, not paid content. We're done with paid content. Bias. Other concerns. Concerns. The first and biggest one we touched upon already, paid publisher trips. For example, when I went to Steamforge Games, they flew me down to Manchester. They put me up in a hotel. I did not get paid for the trip, but my expenses were covered, and I had a good time. That is something we'll talk with them. I've done it with Steamforge. I've done it with IV Games. I've done it with Chip Theory Games. Maybe others. I could be wrong. I've done it with Steamforge twice, IV twice, Chip Theory once. So I've done these paid content creator trips where they effectively bring down a bunch of content creators to talk about their newest Kickstarter game, whether it's Mythic Mischief, whether it's Fractured Sky, whether it's Elden Ring, whether it's Monster Hunter World Iceborne, or whether it is Elder Scrolls Betrayal of a Second Era. Those are the 5 games currently that I can think of. Maybe there's more, but those are the ones I'm thinking of. I've done these paid content, these paid publisher trips or whatever it is, a few times. And when I say paid, I mean I did not receive money for any of these trips. And if I do ever receive money for a trip, I will inform you. As of right now, for some of these, I have been offered money and I have turned it down. You can see why sometimes it's frustrating to have people think I'm a shill and just taking a paycheck from big company or whatever it is when I'm actively turning down money for the sake of not having as... Anyways, so I don't get paid for those trips. If I ever do get paid for those trips, I will inform you. Until then, yes, those trips, the expenses are covered. As much as I want to cover things, I'm not paying to go down to England. And you're like, you shouldn't pay to go down to England, but you shouldn't go down to England. That's a reasonable thing. That's a reasonable stance. You as a viewer, it is a reasonable stance for you to not want me to go on any trip where I'm flown out or driven out or whatever it is, and I get the whole 9 yards and I get treated very special. It is completely reasonable for you as a viewer to not want me to do that. I think the practical reality there is, first of all, I enjoy these trips. As a personal note, I enjoy them. I have fun there, and I don't know if I don't want to give that up. Because I'm here because it's fun. The reason I'm here, the reason I'm doing the videos I'm doing is because it's fun. And I recognize that sometimes choosing fun over complete separation from church and state and all of that does introduce a form of bias. I realize that. And I respect the fact that me doing that might make my channel not right for you. I will also never say something I don't believe in. Like, I mean, I just won't. I will happily go on a trip and tell, let's say, Steamforged Games. I'll happily play a game from Steamforged Games and say, hey, you know what, honestly, I'm happy to vlog about the trip, but I didn't enjoy the game, and so I'm not going to talk about it. I will do that. You don't have to believe that I'll do that, and that's the tricky part, because this is a degree of trust. And if you don't trust me, you shouldn't be watching my channel, but hopefully I'm doing what I can to show you that I'm trustworthy. But again, if you don't trust me, then my opinions should not have merit to you. That's just a practical reality. And so I recognize that paid publisher trips introduce a degree of bias. I recognize that. I try to be mindful of the bias. I try to be even-mannered, and I've always been very clear about that bias, about the fact that we had a trip. And if you want to ignore my coverage as a result, please do. I also think generally I still try to, like, I mean, again, I just, there's no perfect answer. But like when I covered, let's say, Elder Scrolls: Betrayal of the Second Era, or Fractured Sky for that matter, these are games I covered, and I both tell you the things I enjoy, and I tell you the things that I don't enjoy for a game that I was brought in for. It is possible that I will decline to cover a game that I didn't enjoy enough because I feel guilty that they flew me in and I'm going to trash the game. That is 100% possible, but I will not cover it and tell you I like it if I didn't like it. We'll get to the other thing about turning down coverage shortly. We'll get to that. Yes, so number one, paid publisher trips. I am not trying to excuse them. I'm trying to tell you my stance on them, and if that makes my coverage a deal breaker, whether my coverage for those games or coverage across the board, I respect that. General friendships within the industry. This is the next thing, and this goes in hand in hand with the first one. Part of the reason I'm unwilling to turn down the fun of a paid publisher trip is because that doesn't do enough. If my goal is to, strictly speaking, avoid all bias at the cost of fun, I'd have to turn down every single friendship within the industry, and it's a small industry. I'm sorry, it's just a small industry. You, depending on who you are as a viewer, you may or may not realize this, but it's a small industry. It is hard to not be friends with the designers, the owners, the anything, the contacts across the board. It is a small industry. I don't want to put myself alone on an island for the sake of excluding bias from the conversation. And again, I respect that you might want me to, and that might make my coverage not the right fit for you. Totally respect that. Totally respect that. I just want to give you the information. You have to do what you want with that information. So, that covers friendships. Oh, friendships. I mean, so the point of friendships is, yes, I am friends with the people in the industry, and that is one of the biggest degrees of bias I have. Not money, not content creator trips. Friendships within the industry are the biggest form of bias that there are. Of course, I don't want to talk about a game from somebody who owns a company or designed it that I know, and I'm like, hey, I didn't love it. And yet I do, by the way. We're going to come to that soon, but yet I do. I absolutely do, and I mean, again, if you look at my content, if you watch my videos, there's so much content that I'm like, mediocre, it's good. Yes, and then once in a while I'm like, this game's great. But like, there's so much content that is just good. And they're very often from companies and people who I know that are involved with those games. Is it the biggest, hardest bias to avoid? Yes, it is. Do I still do my best? I try. I'm not saying I'm perfect, I'm saying I try. Next one up is prototype coverage. So here's one that I've said this publicly before. This is not a new reveal. I've said this publicly. I've been transparent about this, but it's not something you always hear, so it might be new to you. If I don't enjoy a prototype to the point that it is below a 3 on my rating scale, meaning it's a 2.5 or lower, usually, not always, usually I will decline to cover it. Not always. There have been a few exceptions where I've covered it. I wrestle with whether I should have or shouldn't have. I do, but most of the time, if I don't enjoy a prototype, now this is not across the board, this is not a review. A review, I will review no matter what. I don't care. It's a review. It's a review of a final game. Why am I willing to turn down coverage of a prototype that I played that I'm like, oh, this is a 2.5, I don't want to cover it. And you're like, you have a duty to your audience, Alex. And yeah, I do, with complications. I did a video once with James Hudson from Skybound Games, from Jude City Games, where, and it's a nuanced video. It's the nature of reviewing effectively a prototype, reviewing a work in progress. And it's a complicated subject. It is a complicated subject. You can see that full video if you want. I'll try to link to it down below if I remember. I'm filming this video late at night because of everything going on today. But the crux of it is, how do you review a work in progress? How do you review something that is not yet complete? Here's a game. It's not yet finished. The rules aren't totally done. They're still cleaning things up. There might be changes from the final version. How do you review that? That's not the thing that's going to exist, but this video might exist forever. And I agree with that. I agree with that problem. The flip side of the conversation is you, as the publisher, are asking people to spend money today on the thing that isn't complete. So I, as a content creator, have chosen to take an approach that I review prototypes. I give you my opinion on a work in progress so you can make an informed decision. But what if I really didn't like that work in progress? There's a degree of guilt of, am I really willing to slam? I'll be critical. I'll say, hey, I like this, I didn't like this. I'll give a prototype a 3 out of 5. I've done it plenty of times. Plenty of times. We'll get to that in a second as well. But if I really, really didn't like it, if it's much more negative and very little positive, there is a degree of guilt that goes on in my head of, but it's not even done yet. And you're like, well, but we as the audience should know how bad it is. We're about to spend money in it. And I agree, I do. But it's not done yet, and it's a complicated subject. There is a degree of guilt, and again, this goes back to the thing. Will I say anything good about the game? No, I will offer to not cover it. I will reach out to the creator and say, hey, I really didn't like your game, unfortunately. I think it's just better for me not to cover this game. That's what I will do. And just you, as the viewer, should know that I am willing to do that. Am I willing to tell you a game is good if I didn't like it? No. Am I willing to turn down coverage of a game if it's a prototype? Yes. Which means the next one, which is Kickstarter hype man, shill, all those things, all those conversations where I love everything and I'm so excited about all these games. And the only thing I could really say in my defense there is statistics. Statistics, that's the only thing I could really say in my defense, that if you look at the vast majority of my reviews, are games that are a 3 or a 3.5. That is the most common rating I give to games, the most common rating. And yet somehow, to certain sections of the internet, I am still a Kickstarter hype man. Or just a board game hype man. I don't understand the math. It's just a numbers game. Now I do partially understand the math because, and these are things we've talked about before, but some of it might come from the fact that, hey, if you see me on a Kickstarter page with a testimonial, it probably sounds like I said something good about the game. And I'll say two things about that. Number one is, sometimes testimonials are cherry-picked from the good thing I said about the game, but ultimately I wasn't in love with the game, and I gave it a 3.5, and I said plenty of negative things about the game too, and they picked the good thing to highlight because that's called marketing. That's not my choice, that's their choice, and that is what it is. And the second aspect is, guess what you don't see on a Kickstarter page? A negative or mediocre review of a game. The amount of times my videos have not gone on a crowdfunding page, if you only judge me and my content by seeing me on crowdfunding, of course I'm a Kickstarter hype man. That's where you see the good stuff. If you watch my channel and you see the tons of videos I put out, the most common rating I give is a 3.5, and then 3s and 4s are there. 3s are more common than 4. Actually, that might not be true. 4s might be more common than 3s. I have to check the numbers. I think they're close. And then 4.5s and 5s are fairly rare considering I put out 5 reviews a week. So yes, if you see me being really excited about a game once a month, that's 1 out of 20 games that I'm really excited about. That is just how it works. And it's far less than that usually. I like games. I do. If I didn't like games, I wouldn't be in this hobby, dear Lord. But I like games. But I don't hype everything. Do I think that DEI, Divide et Impera, is one of the most fantastic games I've played this year? 100% yes, I do. Do I think Encyclopedia was an incredible game I played last year? And Mythic Mischief, which I love Mythic Mischief. You haven't seen me say, you have not. I guarantee you have not seen me hyping Fractured Sky. You have not seen me hyping, Veiled Fate. You have not seen me hyping Moonrakers. By the way, I like Moonrakers and I like Fractured Sky. Veiled Fate less for me. But there's and there's love. And I will hype the things that I love, but they're so infrequent. They're so, this is a numbers game. If you don't trust me because I'm a board game hype man, it's math. It's numbers. We can have a difference of opinion, that's sure, but this is just numbers. So, if you think I'm a Kickstarter hype man, and also, by the way, if you ever, and let's put a hand in hand this before I offer this. Let's put a hand in hand with this. I sometimes promote games and talk about games and give a game a 3.5 or a 4, and then it leaves my collection the next day. Not the next day, but whenever. Actually, maybe the next day sometimes. And that sometimes is taken as an indicator against how I'm just telling you to buy a game before immediately getting rid of it myself. And the thing I say in every games leaving the collection video that I do is I play over 350 new games every single year. I cannot keep everything. It doesn't mean I didn't like it. It just means I can't keep 350 new games a year. My collection wouldn't work. It's not functional. So I choose the ones that resonate the most with me. But I'll still say the things that are true along the way. I'll still say which games were enjoyable, which games did I love. I'll still say all the things, but yes, it is possible for me to enjoy a game and for it to leave. That's again, there's a numbers game. I can't keep 350 new games a year. Those things are disparate elements. Which brings me to my last point. If you are someone who ever thinks that I misled you, if you think I've said something about a game and then immediately got rid of it, if you think I've ever led you astray or I've done something that makes you question the integrity of my opinion, my email is down below. It's alex@boardgamecode.com. alex@boardgamecode.com. feel free at any point to ask me for a conversation, to ask me for an explanation where I hop on the phone with you and talk to you through the reason you think I said X about a game and then in reality Y. Ask me, like, please, I beg you, if you think I've led you astray, if you think I've done something wrong, I'm happy to talk to you. I will not be, and let's go ahead and wrap this video up like this, I will not be the content creator for everyone. My content, my approach, everything I do, the way I talk, the way I present, anything, any single thing I do will not make me the right fit for everyone. That is good. That is how we have diversity in the space. That is how we have different voices. That is how we have different channels who grow and build an audience and build a community, because everyone will have different people who resonate with them in different ways. I have my favorite content creators no differently than you have your favorite content creators. That is the nature and the beauty and the growth of the space. But it would be great if the reason you don't like me is more focused on something that you think is like a trust issue or something like that. Like, please hop on a phone with me, please, like, genuinely. It's not that I feel the need to like convince another subscriber. That's not the goal here. I'm in this because I love the hobby. But yeah, it hurts sometimes to pop on the internet and, you know, have people think that you're just there lying to them, that you bought in on the latest hype train of, hey, I can grow a YouTube channel. Like, I've said this publicly before, I took a massive pay cut to do this. I took a large pay cut. I was making 6 figures at my last job. I'm making $50,000 doing this. I took a pay cut to do this because I love this. Like, I'm here because I want to be here. And it's okay if you don't like me. But it would be great. No, never mind. It's okay if you don't like me. Let's just leave it at that. Also, I will add, because I did talk about this video, but I didn't get into it fully, the last conflict, the last bias worth mentioning, because I'm willing to pin comments, I just don't want to, I'd rather be fully transparent in the video. As I mentioned this during the video already, but I am currently CMO of Gamefound, I work for Gamefound, and that does introduce another form of bias. Now, I have reviewed things both positively and negatively for Gamefound games. Even just this most recent week, I covered Guards of Atlantis and, not this week, but like recently, in the past week or two, whatever it was, I covered both Guards of Atlantis fairly positively, and the Hunters, AD 2114, fairly mediocrely. Both are Gamefound games. Again, that's a good example where people will point at the one I reviewed positively as like an indicator of the bias, and then completely ignore the one that I was like, hey, not for me. And so, it does introduce bias. Let me rephrase that. I acknowledge that perceptionally it introduces bias. My own personal opinion is I don't care about covering a Gamefound game and talking about its pros and cons. I just don't care. I mean, I recognize that. I recognize the appearance of bias. I will recognize that. On a personal note, I'm telling you that my personal feeling is that the friendships are the thing that introduce bias far, far more than anything else. And I try my best to navigate them, just like I try to navigate everything else. And that's the conversation. I'm sorry about the drama. I'm sorry about all of it. I'm sorry about the fact that I in any way I'm sorry about the fact that in any way I chose to say anything. I am not here to talk negatively about my peers. I do not like drama. I do not want to stir up drama. I'm not here for it. I also don't love the fact that I'm still dealing with being like, again, I'm going to lose over 200 subscribers over something I didn't do. That's obnoxious. Anyways, until next time, I am Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I appreciate you watching this whole video. And again, to most of you, the practical reality is most of you are people who already know everything I said, and I appreciate you so much. It's why I keep doing what I do, because yes, I have to deal with this and that and all those things, but I get to be in a space I love with people who value what I say, and that's so meaningful. That is so, so meaningful. And so while here and there I'll do stupid videos like this to in some way deal with whatever, the practical reality is that for most of you, thank you. I appreciate it. Like, really, genuinely, I appreciate it. Anyways, go off, have fun, play board games. This was not supposed to be today's video. This video was supposed to be like, I think today's video was supposed to be like an update on my campaign games that are leaving and all that stuff and things. That'll be next week instead, I guess. We'll shift things around. Enjoy your day, have fun, play games. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.